Here we go. I've got our conversation slot. It's day 4, live in conversation with Rebecca Ching. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.
It's like a pleasure. It's absolutely all mine. So if you're live in the group, just to give me a little shout and just let me know that I've done this right. As we know, had a bit of a technical hitch yesterday. But yeah, it looks all good. I'm going to get you back on my screen, Rebecca. So yeah, welcome to anyone that's joining us live, and if you're watching on the replay, we really want you to come back in the group and talk to us about this session. It's been something I've been looking forward to all week, Rebecca. I mean, we've had some amazing conversations in the group, but this one is just, I don't know, one very close to my heart. And I think it's lovely that we're doing it in the evening. We're kind of doing it to, you know, work with your time zone, but also, like, I don't know, something about being a bit more relaxed in the evenings. I know it's still midday for you, but for most of the people in the UK joining in the greenhouse experience, it's like, I sort of said to them, you know, grab a cup of tea or whatever you want to drink and, you know, settle in for this conversation because it's going to be a good one. So I've done a little bio of who you are in the group, but I would love it if you would just, you know, introduce yourself and give us maybe a little potted history of what you do and all the wonderful things that you are working on. Would you do that for me?
Absolutely, Rachel. Well, hello, everyone. So glad to be here with you. For those that are live and for those that are listening to the recording, hello. My name is Rebecca Ching, and I am based in San Diego, California. And I wear a couple hats. I'm wrapping up my 17th year as a business owner and a trained psychotherapist. I run a local integrative mental health practice here called Potentia Family Therapy. And then a few years ago, I started a new business called Rebecca Ching Leadership Coaching and Consulting. And this is where I take the best of my training, understanding personal development and change internally and externally, and I help establish leaders, business owners, and entrepreneurs lead themselves well so they can lead others well for the greater good. And so we do a lot of work around the integration of mindset and mental health, deeply passionate about trauma-informed leadership and trauma-informed entrepreneurship and really those nuances of those things that we don't pay attention to. So leaders like you, Rachel, and so many of the people that you know and work with can run the marathon of leading, running their business, living their dreams without being taken out by the pressures of the world or the pressures that come from themselves.
Oh my goodness, like so much even in there just to dive into. I love the way that you described it as a marathon. And I think there is so much about it, the journey of entrepreneurship, that's about endurance and stamina and training and preparation, and then also kind of well-being. And then, you know, marathon runners, everybody knows it's like, you know, they run as individuals, but actually there's always this big support network behind that training journey, whatever's got them to that day. And I think there's also the sense of, like, you know, when someone wins a marathon and then they've got the medal and they've achieved that thing, and it's very easy to then to just forget all the hard work and the sweat and the tears that's gone in before. And it's a beautiful analogy for business growth, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, little did I've run a half marathon. I did it.
Have you?
I told you the story, but I stopped nursing my son the same day I ran my first half marathon. And 3 days later, I signed a lease for expanding my business. So
Oh, wow.
that was a little nuts. I mean, but this is kind of what entrepreneurs do. We go big, and needless to say, that was not sustainable to do that. But that marathon race taught me so much of, obviously, the preparation for it, the commitment to keep practicing and practicing when I didn't want to. And then running it. And I mean, there were people that were walking faster than I was running at one point too.
Well,
so
I know that feeling.
Like, I'm just going to show up and finish this and do this for me. I had to really be so clear on my why and why now. And it had to kind of come deep from within. And because it was hard, and it was definitely not a fun feeling all of the time. And I think sometimes There's the fantasy of being your own business owner, an entrepreneur. There's the idea of it. And then the actual execution of it that tests any part of you that doubts, any parts of you that have fears, any parts of you that have any struggles in your story. Entrepreneurship and leadership find those and tap into them.
Don't they just?
Yeah.
Don't they just? I guess from a scene setting perspective as well, like you've shared, that's your experience. And, I want to say to those watching this, that I am working with you at the moment. I am loving working with you, having you as my coach to support me. And you are the perfect coach for me right now, and we can go on and talk about that trauma-informed leadership. But part of what I identified for me personally was, life traumas, life events that I'd been through that had then affected the way that I was executing in my business, affected my confidence, affected my perspective, my outlook. And we've been doing a lot of work on like my nervous system, kind of my fight, my flight, how safe I feel, the risks I was willing to take in business because my risk profile had changed due to life trauma. And, I've adored working with you. It's been quite a short space of time, but I think we've made really good progress, and we're going to carry on working together this year. And it makes me laugh because in my little inner circle of business people, we're kind of all working with you at the moment. We all love Rebecca. And I also wish that just more people were getting to coach with somebody who had the same lens that you have. And the reason that I want to make that point is because, as you know, I've always had a coach for 10, 12 years for different things. And I really believe in the value of coaching, but I also had a coach last year who we had quite a negative experience in the end, and she sort of adversely affected my confidence because she wasn't approaching our relationship in what I now know to be kind of a trusted and safe way. So when I reached out to you to work with you, it was really the trust that we were going to, I was leaning into, and that you built very quickly with me. So can we talk a little bit around that? Because I think trust is such an important aspect in business generally, isn't it? And I know you're going to want to talk about courage and for us to be courageous as leaders, but where that fits in with trust and relationships.
Well, trust is the foundational component in any relationship, including with ourselves.
Yeah,
if we don't have self-trust, it's hard for us to trust those many, many decisions we have to make as business owners, as leaders, as entrepreneurs, right? And when we have breaches of trust, like if I say, okay, has anyone experienced betrayal? Has anyone experienced loss? Has anyone experienced disappointment? Has anyone experienced frustration, right? And we can think of stories in our life, but for some reason, we've not included what happens to us in our work. So bringing on someone into our business that betrays us, or, is not honest to us, or disappoints our expectations. Those are real struggles that we deal with too. And we're so hard on ourselves. We're the same human in our personal life as we are in our business. And so these little I sometimes call them little paper cuts. Sometimes they're gut punches in the stomach, but these little that didn't go well. Oh, that was disappointing. Ooh, that hurt. That wasn't okay. That was a boundary violation. In our professional arena, we kind of stuff it away, but these little dings then end up becoming a big glacier that can take us out. And so, and most importantly, where the one of the biggest casualties is our self-trust and our ability to trust our decisions and our ability to trust in ourselves and our dreams and our hopes. And then we pile on ourselves thinking, oh my gosh, I should just believe and get over it. And we don't take into account the business betrayals and the business hurts and the business traumas we've experienced, let alone what's happened in our personal life, because it's the same nervous system.
Yeah. And do you think, just so much good stuff in there. this event that I'm running this week has been predominantly aimed at calling in female business leaders. And I was at pains to say, but anybody is welcome, because the solution lies in equality. So we've got some wonderful men in the group as well. And we've been dancing with feminine energy versus masculine energy, and how we bring a mix of both into our leadership and our approach. But what you just talked about then, do you feel like it is currently a worse problem for women? Because I feel like we were within corporate, that persona of separating out who we are in business from who we are in our family, you know, like leaning into the alpha energy of the corporate workplace. It's like we were supposed to wear this armor and this shield to show that we could cope and compete in the alpha culture. And so the alignment is worse. What do you think? Because I know you work just with anybody, you know, you don't have a gender bias.
No, and for those who identify as female, I can relate to what you said. I worked in corporate, I've worked in DC politics, and there's these general narratives around what it means to be someone who identifies as female, to have those roles. And it depends on our family of origin expectations. So even if it's implied, we hear that. But there's also this expectation of, there's been a lot of, here in the States, I cut my teeth on suck it up, chin up, don't ever let them see you upset. Emotion is bad because you'll be the B word.
Yeah. Push it down.
Or you'll be weak.
Yeah.
And so there was this absolute kind of trying to section off a part of me that actually was one of my best teachers, and what informed me was my emotions, right? And so I think also women are hardwired in a way where I don't like generalizations, but one of the things the science really does show is someone who has a female brain versus a male brain, our ability to multitask is higher. And I think there's just a pure nurture piece there. And so because we can do that, and we also are more comfortable asking for help. And
women.
Yeah, that's
interesting.
Not in the corporate culture, but
no.
Look at traditionally, in
a community sense, going back in history, you mean? Yeah.
Cut that out too, right?
Yeah.
We can juggle a lot. Every personality and hard is nuanced here, but in general, this multitasking piece, and if you're driven and you're in more of a corporate culture, or even in the online space, which is greatly influenced, a little bit of push through, suck it up, break through, overcome.
Hustle.
Yeah, these get done, check, period, move on. And if you struggle with it again, you failed, versus the mindset failing, right?
Yeah, and I know we've talked a lot about, how the online world allows people to put out just one persona, one side of the story, the shiny version of you. And for those of us who are wanting to actually be more in touch with the ebb and flow of emotions, it can be hard to then be in the online world, because you feel like, oh, is it not okay to show up on a bad day?
Yeah, and I think we have really pathologized and shamed struggle within ourselves and within others, instead of really understanding it and leading it in ourselves and others. And I think I see a tide turning, thankfully. Not sustainable. There's some different bodies of research, right? There's been this strong cognitive bent of, if you control your thoughts, you control everything, right? That's one body of science and study. But where I've trained under is more of the folks that we feel in our bodies and our emotions before we even have thoughts to put around it.
Yeah.
We can start to be more aware, more emotionally literate, then we can become more emotionally resilient. And then we're comfortable with other people struggling, whether it's in our personal life, whether it's those clients who have hired us, whether it's our colleagues, and we can navigate this emotion instead of going, oh no, here's conflict. Oh no, I might feel shame. Oh no, I might get rejected or be misunderstood. And then all we're doing is dodging and bobbing and weaving and trying to think our way through it. But what I'm saying is this movement of feeling our way through it is lonely and scary, I think, at times. But entrepreneurs in particular we have a natural bandwidth of just being able to tolerate discomfort a little bit higher. So when it is intolerable, we're very hard on ourselves. But we all have our limits. The sponge does get saturated. And I think so. You throw in kind of the tendency for in general, for women who have a capacity to multitask a lot more and have higher expectations, and be able to reach out and figure it out. And when we can't, instead of saying, "Oh, I've hit my limit," it's "I've failed."
Yeah.
This expectation that we're supposed to think it through versus feel it through, but we really are feeling beings who think versus thinking. And that's really where I subscribe to. And there's a lot of different methodologies and ways of viewing change in personal development there. And so what's powerful around this emotional literacy and resilience piece is then we can build up our trust and say, oh, I know this is conflict. I can do this. We've got it.
And I think the important point in there as well, and I'm sort of smiling because we're working on this, right, is your trust within yourself first. So yes, you want to be building the relationships you trust with everybody else, but the most important relationship is with yourself, and trusting your own instincts and trusting your own decisions, and finding a way to kind of listen to your body, which is what you mean, I think, when you talk about emotions. I know you've asked me sometimes when we've been in conversation and you've been like, where are you feeling that in your body? And when you first asked me, I was like, what? Like, and I'm getting better at it. Such an overachiever, aren't I? I want to be really good at this. But, it was hard, like originally. I'm like, I'm not used to feeling into my body. Oh, it's in my stomach. Oh, it's in my chest. Like, where is it? And I think you're absolutely right that we do feel it in our body before we even process it. And then part of the problem then is then getting caught up in habits where we are relating that feeling in our body to a certain thing. So for me, it's sometimes mixing excitement up with fear.
Yes.
Because they're two sides of the same coin. So I get this feeling in my stomach and I'm like, oh God, I'm scared. I need to run away. And being now self-aware to say, I think I might just be excited about this.
Yeah. That's a great example, because our nervous systems don't tell the difference between excitement and fear. They just know that the stress levels are up, and there's an elevation. So it is about being able to lead ourselves well and say, oh, actually, no, this is actually good. We're okay. I need some space, and that the ability to lead ourselves and all the different parts of us that are trying to keep us safe is really, really, I think, a game changer in entrepreneurship versus externalizing our worthiness, externalizing our safety through comparison, through trying to problem solve and think through everything. Because if we can't get the solution, we only feel more anxious versus really kind of benching the emotional muscle and building up our capacity to do that. And that means sitting with some discomfort. And as humans, we're not big fans of that. But entrepreneurs, we have a capacity to do that. But we have a lot of judgment on when it's okay and when it's not.
Yeah, and we have to have the capacity to do that, because the journey of entrepreneurship is going to be like this. And as you say, you overlay life stuff. And I think if you are entrepreneurial and you've taken the plunge, that's because you value variety and curiosity, and you want to, we've been touching upon this week, but there's something in you that wants to make a bigger impact and do bigger things and create positive change in the world, particularly for what we might refer to as heart-driven entrepreneurs. And something I do want to dive into now, because I know people are interested in this, but this imposter syndrome and how we step past, I guess. I mean, you might pick me up on my words, because I know you do when I say things like that, because I always want to get past it faster and beat it, like I'm in a race with my imposter syndrome. And I can imagine, you go for it. But I can just imagine you saying to me, like, what about if you just made friends with her? Like,
Befriending, yeah, and I shift my language around. It's instead of calling it like pathologizing it, it's really an experience. So I call it an imposter experience, and it really is a powerful inner protector that we can't kill. We can't kill these parts of us that we've identified. You know, whether it's inner critic or fear or overwhelm or the imposter experience. But these are just parts of us that don't know how badass we are. They don't necessarily know us. They're maybe dated, and their intentions actually are altruistic. And this is the mind meld for people who are like, excuse me, this part of me that says, who do you think you are to be showing up in business and doing this? You need to shut it all down is helping me. And I say, actually it is. It says, if you keep the bar low, if you don't risk anything, you'll be safe. So that's what we do. Other parts are like, hell no, I've got an impact to make. I've got not just bills to pay, but I've got a mission to fulfill. And then you have this inner noise that starts
conflict.
You start to identify these different inner protectors that are truly altruistic and build a relationship, and then we lead them instead of them overwhelming and leading us. This is where the magic happens. So I feel like this has been a big shift, because when I do this in my clinical work, and I realized in the professional development arena, there was just this push on through, get over it, overcome. And I'm like, but neuroscience doesn't support that. So integrating some of this mindset shift versus when you feel your imposter experience protector come up, instead of like, oh, you're here again, get away, versus what are you afraid of?
Yeah, well, what do you want to talk about?
What are you worried about? Can I have a little space? We're actually safe right now, but tell me what your concerns are. And you build a relationship up like you would, just go into the pub. And so, or having a cup of tea. And it's feels odd. And some people say, Sue, basically I have multiple personalities. I'm like, no, we are one person. But these are just parts of a system that at the whole we're not broken. And it's just helping us lead from that, what we call a place of self or the soul, depending on how you see it, and lead from that self, the place of self.
Yeah, but I guess I'll say the thing is, for many people, the first step is even just being aware of it. So a lot of that inner dialogue is running in our subconscious, isn't it? It's just there, and we're kind of asleep, like walking around, and it's dictating what we do and how we act and the conversations we have and where we go. And so, in terms of being in a coaching relationship or maybe being in a peer group, one of the things that's so powerful is to start voicing it. And, I know I've voiced things in our sessions and I've been like, oh my God, I didn't even know that was there. Like, where did that even come from?
Paying attention and noticing is one of the most powerful superpowers that we have. And I mean, think about how you feel when you really feel seen. And if we can give that to our system and to ourselves, we just relax. When I feel really seen by someone, I immediately relax. Now, it's not always the case with parts of us, but yeah, it's this sense of really paying attention, not just to the outside world, but to our inner world too, is really what sets, I think, a lot of these leaders and entrepreneurs apart who can run the marathon of the dips, of the seasons of self-doubt, of the curveballs of difficulty, maybe health struggles or relational struggles or a business curveball. That is normal. There's no such thing as an easy breezy coasting entrepreneurial experience. Actually, there's no such thing as an easy breezy human experience.
No, that's the bugger of it, isn't it? I think that's like the underbelly, isn't it? That being a human being is so amazing, and like we're touching into courage and loss and love, and it's the same with entrepreneurial journeys, because if you're not, I guess there are people who have easy breezy journeys, and potentially that's because they're not going over and above their comfort zone. Maybe they're purposefully keeping themselves safe. And if we're going to be more courageous, that's when it's going to not be so easy breezy. And that's how we keep moving forward and developing.
Well, whenever we do something new, it really wreaks a little havoc on our nervous system. And so sometimes we have parts of us that can just push through that discomfort and say, I've got it. But what I've seen is over the long haul, that's not sustainable. And so eventually we have to feel our way through it. Sometimes shit happens and we just have to push through. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
like get through the moment.
That's where adrenaline helps.
Yeah. And crisis stuff and let's fix it. But there's dealing with the aftermath of a crisis too in our businesses and in our lives. And we forget about that. We think just because the intensity is done, but our bodies and our nervous systems and our psyche still hold those stories. And we need to integrate that and just be mindful because we have hangovers from those experiences.
And I think, yes, we need to integrate it. But for me personally, and I'm sure this is the same for everyone else, I needed help to integrate it. So also, if we're talking about going through, you know, whatever pitfalls, whatever curveballs in life or in business, fight, freeze, you know, what happened to me, as you know, is that actually I ended up frozen. You know, I did my fighting bit, and then, you know, I've frozen. Then actually, if we stay in inaction for too long, then that can be equally dangerous because, as you say, we're not doing enough new things to get our nervous system like playing again and being curious and having a good time.
So you know, I don't know if you were taught this, but when I was in elementary school, we were taught fire safety, which is odd. But they said if there's ever a fire in your house, what are the things you do? You stop, drop, and roll. Did you ever hear that in your childhood?
No. Where do you worry about to roll to? I guess along the floor.
Roll on the floor because the smoke rises, right? So we had to stop, no, drop to the floor where the oxygen was better, and then our way out of it. So this is just elementary school. I don't know. And so what you're talking about before we even get to the fixing and the integration and the good stuff, it's almost the stop, drop, and roll of when you feel a flash of something. The wave of self-doubt, the wave of fear, the wave of self-judgment. We stop and notice. And we do a U-turn, do the Y-O U-turn, stop, do the U-turn, and then get curious about where we feel it in our body, how we feel towards it, and then we can see the parts that object to it and the inner noise that gets loud, and befriend it and build and begin to get to know it. So that's just the triage, right? The stop, drop, and roll of when we feel these flashes of emotion or a strong belief about ourselves that isn't true, but really toxic or damaging.
And to do that with curiosity rather than, you know, starting to berate or judge it or get frustrated with it, you know, which is where many of us go, I think. It's like, oh, God, it's that again, you know, especially if there's something that you notice is coming up regularly and you just, I know I've said this, I just want to be done with it now. I'm tired of having that limited belief, you know.
Exhausting. Yes, I mean,
it is.
Break from this stuff sometimes, and I think that's where it's the marathon. We have to recognize that we ebb and flow in our own personal growth and professional growth, and we have to. It's exhausting being human sometimes. It just is.
It is, and I think that's when then overlaying the entrepreneurship aside, you know, on top of that as well, and then we have these extra challenges. And also, you know, I've been kind of banging the drum this week is then the unique challenges that exist for women because of whether it's societal, whether it's cultural, whether it's like genuine, you know, that we're the primary carers at home. So we've got a lot of balls juggling in the air and really just trying to be so kind and compassionate and patient with ourselves, that the struggle is real, like this is hard and that's okay. And also, you know, building that support network to have the conversations and to normalize it, and to help us kind of, I know I certainly feel this, you were talking about being seen. You said it was relaxing. And I think my observation on that was that actually when you're first like playing with being genuinely seen, it's very uncomfortable, like very vulnerable and naked before it becomes relaxing, you know?
No, I appreciate that. I think some parts will immediately respond and other parts are so used to being in the shadows or getting attacked And so it takes a while. It's not like your BFFs right away. That's a really good point. And in the terms of curiosity, I want to make sure I note that it's not the why did you do this? Because that's a judgmental curiosity. It's really a non-judgmental, non-agenda curiosity that takes a practice to get there. It's really hard to just to go, tell me more, and genuinely just stay there and listen.
Is that your best question, would you say? You know, so you're thinking about like practical tools. Is that a great question? You just tell me more. Like, and would you advocate kind of getting a piece of paper out and actually writing that? Like journaling is a powerful tool.
More. What are you afraid of? What are your concerns about? Tell me why you're here. Tell me why now. And just without trying to have the other parts that are like, listen, we've got 5 minutes until we have to get other things done, or the kids are waking up from the nap soon or coming home from school. We don't have time to dawdle with this versus, hey, yeah. So that those curiosity questions, mapping them out. Really, I'm working on a freebie option that when it's done, I'll send it to you so you can share it with your community on the anatomy of the U-turn. So that'll help people practice with some questions and different things. I'll definitely get that to you. But the tell me more and just leave it there. Or, hey, what are you afraid of right now? What are you concerned about this decision or this choice or the pace of things? And really practicing that listening and noticing is really inefficient, it feels like in the short term, but it is building a relationship with ourselves and our system so that we can best lead ourselves.
So we journal them out, and then we might have a list, 3, 4, 5 things that say, well, I'm afraid of this. And sometimes, they can surprise us. And what then? We have this little list.
Sure. And usually we get to know that these parts are working so hard when we hear those fears and concerns and what their jobs are for us. We can understand why it's hard for them to relax. And that's usually the map of the work that I do with my clients, because usually they're protecting us from feeling overwhelmed with shame or despair or fear. Because they think if I don't do my job, usually they'll say, I'm like, tell me what you're afraid of if you don't keep my life small. And usually it's like, well, you're going to take a risk and you're going to get hurt and you're going to feel this way and never recover. And so it's a very dated, it's not logical, it's not necessarily true, but these parts are powerful. And there's a book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score.
All right.
I really feel like it should be standard reading for everyone, but entrepreneurs and leaders, whether they're leading themselves or others, really just talks about we can't overpower our body. Our body will always win. Physically or emotionally will win. We can't just mindset over matter. Contrary, again, that's the lens that I adhere to. And this book is incredible, an incredible body of research too. And Bessel's a Dutch, he's in the States, but he is both a clinician and a researcher. So back to your question though, is this curiosity. And I really would just encourage people to practice there. So you're like, what do we do? What do we do? And it's like, well, let's just stay here for a while and get this non-judgmental, non-agenda curiosity. And then what gets in the way of that? That's usually a good chunk of work for a while.
What always interests me about this type of thing as well is that I think some of those tools, like the one we're talking about now, feel like deceptively simple. You know what I mean? Like we tend to get resistance to them as entrepreneurs because the intellectual part of our brain, like most of us are bright and we might be A-type overachievers, and we're like, it must be more complicated than that, This idea that we can just sit and do some simple, like feels simple. It's like, well, that's not going to sort it out, is it? And, it's really powerful.
So here, you hit on something so crucial and so part of the entrepreneur and leadership world. If it's simple, then it's like, it's almost brush aside. But these things that are so simple are the hardest to actually implement and practice on a daily basis. We like things challenging and hard and want to hunker down, but the simple is a bit boring, tedious. We hate tedious. It doesn't feel efficient. It's not exciting, right? So the simple we kind of poo-poo, and we also think, oh, this is easy. I should have done this. Maybe there's something else I should do, dig deeper, harder. But it's these little simple but difficult to implement and practice tools that really are the biggest focus. It isn't magic. There isn't a magic bullet.
I think it's really interesting as well, because I feel like somewhere in your innate intelligence, even though you're going, this is simple, it's not going to work, there's somewhere in your innate intelligence that's always also saying, this is really frightening and really hard, so I'm not going to do it. I mean, I remember going to 10 years ago now, going to a session with a psychologist where we were doing some journaling work, and actually I wrote some things down in this book, and I remember just wanting to lock it up afterwards. Like, everybody was sitting around with their notebooks, and I was looking at my notebook like it was this like smoldering bomb, you know, that it was so dangerous because I'd written these things down and suddenly they were like out in the open. And, you know, I don't think that's properly exercised from my body now, but I've got wiser and, you know, more open and honest and been more vulnerable as time has gone on and embraced that. But certainly where I was then 10 years ago, you're just starting out in business or coming out corporate, and all of that, it's weak to show, you know, that I've got, because I was picking up on you saying, you know, we're good at asking for help. When I was in corporate, like, asking for help was like not cool. Like, as a lawyer, I wasn't meant to show that I didn't know the answer to something. Like, in fact, if anything, in the legal world, we're kind of encouraged to look like the, you know, the absolute gurus of all things. We're not really encouraged to say, I don't know. And, you know, for me, that was a huge lesson in entrepreneurship, to be like, I don't know, but I'll go and find out. Or I don't know, but I'll go and find somebody who does. And leaning into that was such a relief.
Right. But it's a risky, scary endeavor to trust yourself, to trust your instincts, versus to do what people say you need to do to fit in. Because if we think, oh, I might lose my job, I might lose my reputation, people won't respect me, then we end up compromising who we are, our integrity, our values, our boundaries, for fear of not having that sense of community. And I love how Brené Brown talks about in her research that we often fit in over belonging. Fitting in is being who other people want us to be, and belonging is being who we are and loved and respected and accepted as we are. Yeah. And it doesn't start within, but that's insidious, and it sneaks in, because when I talk to people about these things, like trusting yourself or following those instincts, yeah, but this will happen. Yeah, but this will happen. Yeah, they'll think this, they'll do this. Those are real concerns and real objections that we have to navigate how to lead ourselves through, because we don't want to, you know, I got to keep my job, or I got to keep this client or reputation, whatever that may be. So, but this, I think, particularly the flavor of indoctrination women have had is who we should be and shouldn't be, and how we should act. You know, be nice, but not too nice, but not too mean. You know, like you know, the porridge. You know, it's too hot, too cold, just right. That's just right is different for everybody. So then we're very aware of what everyone else wants from us, and people pleasing and hustling and over functioning, and we've lost ourselves.
Yeah, gosh, just again, there's just so much to delve into, isn't there? Just like I resonate so deeply with all of that. And I think then when I was trying to fit in an environment where I was never going to belong because of the values and the attributes and the attitudes of those people. I'm actually probably wrong to say the people, maybe more about the culture. My hallucination is a lot of the people didn't resonate with those values either, but it's like conditioning, and it's endemic within an organization, and then the freedom of being in your own business, and you can create your own culture, you can write your own rules, you can attract team members who share your values, but until you get truly connected with those values and able to enunciate them and walk them and talk them and be them, we're going to keep like attracting the wrong clients or attracting the wrong team members, because well, it's, you know, it's energy, I guess, isn't it? It's, you know, what we're putting out is to some extent what we're going to get back. So it starts with us, like within.
And I mean, I think it's traumatic when we deny ourselves and our truth for so many years, and then we create a space where we can be true to ourselves, but we still have to address those parts with saying, are you sure?
Quite frightening.
Are you sure you're going to do this business and people are going to show up? Are you sure people will buy this widget or this service or work with me? Because, are you sure? And it can still mess with our ability to trust ourselves. And there's different burdens of poor beliefs that are keeping us small. And that's the really unburdening those beliefs, the hangover, that's the work that I do with so many people, because they said the parts of them know what they're capable of, but it's just this residual stuff that still gets forced by culture externally. And we can find social proof internally too. So it's a tricky one and if you're courageous, you're also afraid. You can't have courage without fear.
No.
When I see this no fear stuff, I kind of get perplexed, because that's a lobotomy. That's not the human experience. It's just
fear is there to keep us safe. So
right.
We want to get rid of it.
We don't want to get rid of it. We just have to help it realign. Sometimes, the fear.
And where let's look into this one a little bit, because I think this is, as I've been meandering through topics this week, I've been trying to balance my love for the stats. So I've been sharing lots of stats about how we're seeing more women going into business, but we're seeing them failing at a faster rate than men, how little funding is available for women, and trying to pick into the intersection between, are we being ambitious enough? Are the barriers too hard and we just need more time? My big love is that we need to collaborate stronger. We need stronger communities. We need to move forward together rather than isolating ourselves and doing it alone. But what you and I talk about a lot, which is where I want to go with this question, is pace. And about going at the pace that's really laughing at me, the pace that's right for you, and respecting the season of life that you're in and what feels right, and not trying to push yourself too fast just because that's what somebody else is doing and you're starting to compare, or, respecting, but you know where I'm going with this, don't you? And wanting people to be in a community that is values-based rather than like the metrics. Rather than like we see a lot, don't we, when we're building communities of business owners, come in because you're now earning 6 figures, or come in if you want to get to 7 figures. And we're like, well, okay, I'm ambitious, but like I don't want to fall over on the route. And how do I pace myself? So talk to me, like share me your wisdom.
I mean, you're hitting on, though, this is a systemic issue, not just internally. Not only, yes, this is a better time more than ever to start a business. There's so many things that are easy, systems and resources in theory. And women are starting more than ever, and their businesses aren't succeeding at a level, right, that's different than men. Absolutely. And we are running against systemic sexism and racism. I think if this is a woman of color, the statistics are even more discouraging and disheartening. And so, everything is harder. And so there is systemic cultural oppression that we are navigating.
Yeah.
And then the expectation.
And just I'm going to say to that, like in terms of these powerful conversations that I want us to have, it's about, let's just accept that is the truth. Like the stats are not lying, it exists. The sooner we all come together and talk about it, like a revolution, and be more honest rather than kind of pretending that it's not there. And then how do we move forward into some sort of action, or at least a bias for action?
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I hear is, community over competition. And women, it was interesting, I'm married to a historian. My husband teaches advanced placement, which is kind of the equivalent of IB in Europe, AP US history and world history. And we were talking about what's been going on in our country here. And he always drops these beautiful wisdom bombs to me. And he said that the author of The Wizard of Oz, his mother-in-law was very involved with Susan B. Anthony and the women's suffrage movement. And he said that he was so deeply influenced by her that in The Wizard of Oz, he specifically wrote Dorothy's kind of antagonist, the person that was against her, as a female, because his mother-in-law said that the number one enemy of women and that what's going to be the biggest downfall of women is other women. And that's just stuck with me this week because we talked about this on Monday morning, and I've been thinking about that. And so your mission to have communities of hard, courageous conversation, but we're also come from a culture where it's been okay to pit us against each other, saying your success means my downfall. And so scarcity mentality, we get to help reauthor that individually, but also collectively. So yes, these are the statistics, and then this systemic oppression of really saying we have absorbed some of that and we turn on each other. Doesn't mean we have to help every single one just because you're female, but it's recognizing our own worthiness and safety and that other people's success is not a threat. That takes a lot of courage and confidence and personal strength and self-trust. But this is where I see, your desire to shift the conversation and shift this from just a theory to practice of business owners succeeding. And it will be very uncomfortable to do that. And we have to do a lot of our own work and then have the capacity to have hard conversations together. So I just think, my gosh, so that was, Susan B. Anthony, that wasn't yesterday. And this is a statement that was said then. And we look at what's going on today and those numbers that you've been quoting. So I think this is the part too, is how do we stop being our own worst enemy and the enemy of other women too? Again, it's not about agreeing and supporting blindly, but we don't have to be the enemy of ourselves or other women, even if we disagree.
And I think, the enemy can also be as simple as, not speaking up or not supporting. So it doesn't have to be a kind of an actual negative thing, but it can be in the silence or in the space where you don't reach out, you don't offer a hand where you could. And we do have to be careful because also biologically we tend to overgive. So it's like the whole thing of like, don't give from an empty jug sort of thing. It's like quite a balance, isn't it? And again, why I want the greenhouse to be not a women's only network is I want men in there. I believe the solution lies in equality, and what we actually want is like, I want more of the masculine energy that gives me kind of more confidence and more focus and direction, all the best attributes of that alpha leadership. And then I also want to see all the men that I love, and even the ones I haven't met yet that I'm going to love, but for them to have the space to be more emotional and be more empathetic, and for it to be okay for them to show weakness. And I think I told you the story about an audit I did recently with a company, and the whole board is male, and it was meant to be quite a systematic review of processes and whatever. And when I got in sessions with them, and I was like, and how did that make you feel, when X happened? And they're looking at me like, feel? Like, is there anybody listening? And it was really lovely to see some of maybe the softening within that difficult conversation, where they did then put their guard down and say, well, yeah, I felt like this. Like one of the guys said to me, oh, I went home and kicked the cat. And he's kind of like, tongue in cheek, but, I knew exactly what he meant, and he knew what conversation we were having. And that was so powerful. And I think that's part of our duty as women, just like I guess it always has been in all time. Like you said earlier in the call, we've got a history of asking for help and collaborating and bringing one another together, like round the campfires and doing the cooking and having these powerful conversations. And how do we get that back? So many women I know in business, they find it hard to trust other women. They've been let down in friendships, betrayed, hurt, lied to. We kind of expect it of men almost, but then when a woman does it, it's like some sort of higher expectations. Perhaps that's conditioned from generations of old. But yeah, I haven't even got a question there, have I? I'm just like really like enjoying jamming with you on all this stuff. I think what I wanted to get out of tonight's session and having you on board with us is also this sense of just normalizing the challenge, you know, the marathon, you know, the struggle is real. I feel like people don't talk about that in leadership enough.
No, they talk about it quickly with the solution. And one quick thing I want to circle back to when you were sharing that boardroom example and you asked the guys how they felt, right? And you noticed the softening and you mentioned the word weakness. But weakness is I can't protect myself. And that's not the case. But this is again, and I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I'm a certified Daring Way facilitator and consultant with Brene Brown's organization. So that's why I'm an early work. So I've been doing this for 8 years now, which is crazy. But, and so it's so in my bones that she really differentiates weakness. I can't protect myself to vulnerability, which is risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. So to share the emotional exposure, to share that's dangerous to our nervous system, but it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of courage to hold that space. And so that's where you're going to pivot towards. But the belief is, I will get killed in the boardroom if I show emotion. That's weak. That's the belief, right? And so then the protectors are shut that emotion down. So I think we get to help be on the front end of continuing to communicate that sharing struggle and emotions and messing up and rising from that, that's part of the human experience, the leadership experience, the entrepreneur experience, and being all in and caring. We're going to have difficult stuff happen because when we're shutting it all down and protecting ourselves, we're actually doing such harm to ourselves and to others, where we get to be more contagious with being real. And that's what you're craving. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that contagious, Brenny talks about courage being contagious, doesn't she? So we are, as we model with more courageous behaviors, conversations, showing our vulnerabilities, then it gives other people permission to do that, right?
You nailed it. You nailed it. And that's there's the paying attention. And then we get to deepen permission that it's okay to have these internal or external struggles. Our worthiness and our safety aren't on the table for discussion or for negotiation if we show our human experience. Now we need boundaries. We need safe people and stuff. It's not airing everything all the time. But yeah, these are all nuanced conversations, but such a great topic. I love that.
We talk about also showing the scabs, not the wounds. So when we want you to be vulnerable, it's not just about like suddenly bearing your heart, like everywhere you go, you pick and choose your moments, right?
We really, I will show my wounds to my deep, deep inner circle. That's private. That's private. And I love how Brene says vulnerability ceases to be vulnerability without boundaries and permission. So if I'm like, blah, but I haven't said, hey, I've got something really difficult to talk about. Is this a good time? And this is kind of the general area what it's about. And if I'm not honoring the boundaries of my own self and those around me and get permission, then it's not vulnerability, it's something else. And so it's a really nuanced piece. It's really tough, especially if people are going through a crisis or going through a lot or never had boundaries in their life modeled to them. And it's hard, but it is hard. Yeah. Love this analogy, because then I love to say, okay, I've done some work of some healing. So I'm at a place where I'm not as consumed by that wound, but I can share that story. I love that analogy, showing the scabs and the scars, but not the raging wound to the world. But again, my closest people, there's private and personal. We want to show the personal, but it's Brene's in The Gifts of Imperfection. She says, am I sharing the right thing at the right time with the right person? And that's just I ask myself that. Even my husband, who is an educator, right? He teaches, and he doesn't have time even to use the restroom. And home, and it's not a good time to talk about some big financial thing or something with the kids. He needs to use the restroom, get a snack, a nap, and then I can dump on him. So I think there's this expectation, you have to be there for me all the time, or I'm supposed to be there for them all the time. But this right person, right time, right topic.
Yeah, and this comes back to everything that I really feel passionately about with the greenhouse as well is because what it's specifically for entrepreneurs and business owners, and the stats are like, we're a tiny group, and we're also really small. It's even smaller than when you get looking at the ones that are reaching a certain level and want to move further. And what I had for a large part of my entrepreneurial career was no friends in my close circle. And my husband's not, running a business. And so no one that genuinely understood what I was talking about. So I might go and then some of the feedback would be like, that sounds really difficult. Why don't you just go back and get a job? It's just like, it comes from a good place, but actually it's not that helpful. And so, what we want is, or what I think, my hallucination about what the world needs, because it's what I need. They say you teach what you want to learn, don't they? I want to have this safe space where people who are going through similar experiences can talk openly and honestly, and or ones that have kind of been through that and come through the other side. So you've got the people that have got the wounds, and then if you've got the scabs, then that's so powerful. Like, oh, look, I've got a scab and I'm still here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't see it as a hallucination. I see it as a vision. I think it's true. And
I love how you pick me up on language.
I know.
I love it. I love it.
I think that's important. And I think it's important to share. And the loneliness of entrepreneurship is absolutely real.
Yeah, it can be really debilitating when you try and carry, your big backpack, and you're trying to prove that you've got it all together and you've got it all sorted, and such a relief to put that backpack down and go, having a shit day, shit week, shit month, like however long it lasts. And part of the power, I think, of the work that we do together is being able to say, is it all bad? We had this conversation with Laura this morning. Is it all bad? And then we were able to bounce them. Actually, things are mostly great, but we do tend to fixate on the perceived problems, don't we?
Well, if you think about it, you've got a glass of water and you put a drop of black dye in a clear glass of water. It does permeate it. And so it does touch all of that water, but it doesn't make it all black, but it does shift it. And so sometimes it can
unless you shake it.
We shake it and we can shift how we see it, but doesn't mean it's that's why it's what it looks like, and so it's amazing that we get overwhelmed by the parts of us that are trying to protect, or the parts of us that are still carrying the burdens of business betrayals or business losses or whatever that may be, disappointment. We have to move through the emotion, or the emotion will kick our butt, and that's not how we're taught. We're taught to step it aside. Innately, we have a high capacity to tolerate pain. And so sometimes we take a lot more than we need to too. So that's
what's really important to me as well. And we're going to have to wrap up, aren't we? But what's so important to me, having children, and many business owners do have young families. And actually, as we model these behaviors, we know that little eyes are watching us, and it's really important that we are taking care of our emotional health first and foremost. All the strains of entrepreneurship and life, and the strains of raising children, to check that we are demonstrating those values of getting support, getting help, talking things through, rising again. I kind of wish that entrepreneurship as well was taught to children in school, from all the angles, all the emotional stuff that we're talking about today, to give resilience from the beginning, rather than it being like a baptism of fire in our later years.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of lessons. I think I'd love to see that, where we teach entrepreneurship early on. That would be a revolution in itself, for sure.
We've run out of time. I mean, I could literally talk to you for hours and hours, and I'm sure people will have enjoyed listening to this conversation. You've just got so much wisdom to share. Is there anything you want to leave us with in terms of, like, I guess my theme for the week in the greenhouse experience was about, I don't want you to give up on your businesses. Is there anything you'd like to share with that in mind?
Mm-hmm. So not to give up. Stay connected to your values. And if you're not, be crystal clear on them. They are your anchor when things are feeling dark and difficult. And stay curious. Just stay curious when the curveballs show up, and fight to keep your worthiness and your safety on the table for other people to have a say over.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you so much. And just looking at the sign in your background, connection is to our soul as oxygen is to lungs. And when I put your photo up in the group, I had you holding that photo. Is it a Brené quote?
Nope, it's a me quote.
It's a Rebecca Ching special. It's beautiful. And I have to say, like, I felt connected to you from our first conversation. And, you know, it just gets deeper every time we do more work, even when it's really hard and icky. And I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind, you know, that relationships can strengthen from sharing the darkness. And
Totally.
makes the light much more beautiful when it comes. So you're doing amazing work in the world, Rebecca. Thank you. And thank you for being here tonight, giving up your time to come and be in the greenhouse experience. And I'm sure I speak for everyone there's been people in the live saying thank you. Yeah, I think lots of people will have enjoyed this, and those watching it on replay, I think everyone will get loads of value. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for showing up and you pursuing, and for your vision and your mission. Very grateful for your leadership in this world.
My vision, not my hallucination. Love that. Love that. Words matter. Thank you, Rebecca. Lots of love.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.